I'm Dimmock. Just for anyone who can't see me, I am a white plus size woman with long red brown hair, and I am wearing a black and purple shirt. I live on the traditional territories of the Cree, Métis, Black and Blackfoot people who have been here since time immemorial. So yes, I'm founder of Accessibility for Everybody. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go over just what lipedema and lymphedema are so we can just kind of tease out the differences between the two because they sound alike, which is so much fun when you're trying to explain things. And also, they often get confused, even with doctors. Okay, so lipedema is a chronic, progressive medical condition that primarily affects people assigned female at birth and is characterized by bilateral, symmetric buildup of fat in the legs and sometimes the arms and lower trunk. Lipedema is a common but underrecognized disorder and can cause pain, swelling, tenderness, and easy bruising. Lymphedema, however, is a lifelong and progressive inflammatory disease caused by a dysfunction in the lymphatic system. As a result, lymphatic fluid accumulation can cause chronic swelling. Lymphedema occurs most frequently in the legs and arms, but can occur anywhere in the body. So my condition, like Allison mentioned, lipo-lymphedema, is a combination of both lipedema and lymphedema. Um, so lipedema is not currently recognized in Canada by our healthcare system and is not taught in any medical school. This condition often goes unrecognized and undiagnosed because it's also not taught to any of our doctors. So a lot of the times when I have to go see a new specialist or a new doctor, I actually have to bring information for both conditions with me. I bring pamphlets with me to every doctor. And then I'm sure, as you can tell, telling a doctor that they might not know something goes over really, really well. So I always suggest that people bring these pamphlets, but then just say, hey, just so that we're on the same page, I want to make sure that we both have the same understanding of this condition. This is what I've learned. And then I hand them the pamphlets and we make sure that we start out the conversation on the same page. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen here so you guys can see my lovely presentation. So let's talk about my experience. This is Cirque du Legs, Lipo-Lymphedema edition. So I created these slides because I wanted to inject a little bit of lightness into the conversation. Lipo-lymphedema is a very difficult condition to live with. It's two conditions masquerading as one. And a lot of the times those things are very frustrating and very difficult to deal with, especially when it's every single day. Okay. Now we have here my lovely wheel of torture. So as you can see on here on my wheel, we have all of the things that I get to deal with having these two conditions. So some of my frustrations include paying for manual lymphatic drainage. Now, we all love manual lymphatic drainage massage therapists. They're fantastic. However, paying out of pocket for these things is extremely expensive. And on top of that, most of us who have these conditions can only afford maybe once every 2 weeks or once a month, whereas we really should be having this treatment at least twice a week. Okay, but unfortunately, it's very expensive, and there is no coverage under the Alberta healthcare system, and I'm not aware of any coverage across Canada. Okay, then there's everyone's favorite, washing and wearing compression. I don't know a single person who loves compression. We wear it in order to reduce swelling and in order to increase circulation, but it's not fun to put on. It can take half an hour to 40 minutes to put on, depending on how many pieces you have. It's not a good time. Personally, myself, with having lipedema as well, finding pants to fit is a big issue. As you can imagine, because the most of the accumulation of the fat on my legs is on my legs, most lipedema patients will have more like cylindrical legs, and so they don't have what would be considered a normal shape to them, which means I get a wide leg or something with stretch, and that's about my only options. Then we, of course, have swelling. So both of these conditions actually come with a fair amount of inflammation and swelling. And we have to wear compression for that. We hate the summertime because, of course, that makes us swell. And on top of that, it can limit our mobility. So there are lots of things on this wheel that are really representative of things that I personally struggle with and a lot of people with these conditions struggle with. And then there are the physical barriers that are provided by my environment. So I don't know about you guys, but for me personally, I hate airplane seats. As a plus size person with lipedema, with the majority of the weight being in my hips and my thighs, um, I don't fit well in a lot of chairs, whether that be airplane seats, whether that be chairs with armrests, bathroom stalls. Good Lord. None of these things have enough room for me personally, and I don't know many people who think we have way too much room in a bathroom stall or an airplane seat. So those are some of the things that I personally deal with. There are a couple on here that we'll get into, but that's what I affectionately like to call my wheel of torture. Ah, yes. So now we have my roller coaster of emotion. So when you get one of these diagnoses, much less both, a lot of the times what happens is you go on this roller coaster of emotion of, oh my gosh, yes, I finally know what's happening. So you have that little bit of relief. But it's also happening in combination with grief because most of the time, both of these conditions are not diagnosed until later on in life because they're both not overly well known. Lipedema, especially, most women, or sorry, most people assigned female at birth or women are diagnosed later in life. We're talking 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. So we have been going throughout the majority of our lives without actually knowing what our body is doing and why we're painful and what's happening. And when our doctors don't even know, you can imagine the amount of frustration that brings. And of course, knowing that there's not a lot of resources here in Canada for lipedema specifically, um, we end up with a lot of depression. We also realize that this is about to change our whole lives. Both of these conditions are not just, oh, okay, take a pill and you'll be fine. There is a major overhaul of our personal lives with these conditions. And doing it alone is really depressing. And so there's a lot of emotion that comes with these diagnoses. And in Canada, we're not great about supporting people after we've given out a diagnosis. And so that's why, organizations like the Alberta Lymphedema Association and Lipedema Canada are so, so important because don't do this alone. If you have one or both of these conditions, do not do this alone. It is really, really important to reach out and get support. Ah, yes, the self-worth whack-a-mole. So, I'm sure you guys have an idea of what this might be about, but the societal expectations that we place on people is a lot. And unfortunately, most of the time, it's really embedded with fat phobia and anti-fat bias. And because lipedema is a condition that is genetic and it is not something that is caused by eating too much, and it is exercise and diet resistant, we have been told our whole lives to just move more and eat less. And it hasn't worked. In fact, the majority of people have done all of those things and have tried to the point of exhaustion to make their bodies smaller. And this is all due to the societal expectation that our bodies should all look the same, that our bodies should all be slim or slender. And it's unrealistic. And first of all, our bodies are not a problem to be fixed. And I think it's really, really important here to notice that it's really having a big impact on confidence in patients with these conditions and really having a big impact on their self-esteem. And when you have tried everything you can think of and your body doesn't seem to be doing what you want it to do, and it seems to be like the enemy. It's really, really difficult to deal with. And we go back to that roller coaster of emotion. This is adding to it, right? Um, and it is one of those things that it's taken me 35 years to figure out my body's not the problem. This is a genetic condition. I didn't cause this. And if anyone out there is like a provider or is a medical professional or a massage therapist who has clients like this, it's really, really, really important to make sure that you're telling your patients this is not their fault. I'll be honest, until I heard those words come from someone else's mouth, I didn't believe them. I was very fortunate to have a really good massage therapist who was extremely knowledgeable about both my conditions. And he said, Diana, it's not your fault. And I said, wait, what do you mean it's not my fault? Everyone my entire life has told me it's my fault. Like, I don't understand. What do you mean it's not my fault? And he said, it's not your fault. And that was a really big game changer for me because that allowed me to put down the shame. Put down the shame that the societal expectations had placed on me and that I'd placed on myself that I was failing, that I wasn't doing this right. And especially with lymphedema as well, a lot of the times with secondary lymphedema like I have, I was so worried that I caused this to myself, and that's not the case. Quite often, the lymphedema comes um, after the lipedema because the lipedema fat, which by the way is not obesity, has literally taken up so much space that it starts putting pressure on the lymphatic system and does damage. And then once you have a damaged lymphatic system, you end up with lymphedema as a secondary cause. So even though not everyone that gets lipedema will have lymphedema, there is a much higher risk for us to have it. And especially when you're not getting diagnosed until you're later in life. Had I been diagnosed 7 years ago when this started, or when the lymphedema symptoms started, I likely would not have the progression that I have now. And both of these conditions are progressive. They continue to get worse over time. Ah, yes. Something I'm all too familiar with, masking my identity. So, with both of these conditions, because you're going through a lot of emotional turmoil, because you're going through a huge change in your routines and your life, and not everyone understands, and not everyone even believes you sometimes, you do a lot of masking. Now, sometimes it looks like mimicking, sometimes it looks like suppressing your feelings, sometimes that's putting on a brave face when you just have to struggle through and deal with whatever life is throwing you that day. Sometimes it's I'm anxious and I have to do something to, to stim just to keep going because I personally also have ADHD, which is a really common comorbidity with lipedema. And so stimming for me is just doing something with my body that allows me to get some of that nervous, anxious energy out. And then, of course, there's people pleasing, especially for anyone who is a woman or assigned female at birth. We put a lot of pressure on people to take care of everyone else but themselves and to put everyone else first. And I used to do it. I'll be honest with you. I used to be a people pleaser. I mean, I'm not quite reformed yet, but I'm trying. But people pleasing unfortunately means we're not doing the self care that we need. We're not putting ourselves first occasionally. What I've learned since having these conditions is that self care is not selfish. And I think it took a really long time for that to sink in for me. But the self care and putting myself first occasionally is a requirement now because I can't just push through. I can't push through the pain. I can't push through the swelling. I can't just, do that 8 hour drive in one shot. It doesn't happen anymore. I actually have to take breaks every 2 hours. I have to get up and move around. I can't do like work the way I used to do. And that's one of the things that is really common with these conditions is it actually starts to affect those other parts of your life. And I don't know about you, but I don't know many jobs that are willing to let me get up and walk around every single hour while I'm sitting at a desk. But I can't sit at the desk anymore for 8 hours. And so it really does impact more than just your personal life. It starts to impact your work as well. Ah, yeah. This one I feel all day, every day. So lipedema, because it is an abnormal accumulation of fat in the hips, thighs, and lower legs, as well as lymphedema, which can come with skin changes and swelling, really makes you feel like you're constantly on display. Um, I have always been very tall, so I was used to, people looking at me for that. But it wasn't until I turned 13 or 14 in that puberty stage that I started to have lipedema become really prevalent, which is really common. A lot of the times, lipedema happens at hormonal changes in women or people assigned female at birth, whether it be puberty, pregnancy, or menopause. But also, just for fun, it can also get progressively worse with a lot of stress. I don't know about you guys, but it's been kind of a stressful year. So managing those things are really, really important, especially the stress part. But unfortunately, when my lipedema started to show up, I went from a normal size, straight size kid, to a plus size kid in a very short amount of time. And not only was it confusing for me, but all of a sudden I'm consistently visible all the time. I'm getting unwanted weight loss advice and diet advice, and people are staring. And it's really difficult knowing that whatever you do in a public space is being watched. And it's very difficult knowing that you're going to end up kind of policing yourself. And that's one of the things that really happens with these conditions too, is you end up changing your own behavior because you're so worried about what everyone else is going to think. And that's a really difficult thing to start to work through and start to care less about. Mm, juggling responsibilities. This is my favorite one. So now that I have these conditions, I usually have to choose one, maybe two things what I'm going to do. I don't get to do all of the things that I want to do anymore, which is really frustrating. If I want to have fun one day, that's great. I'm going to go out and run around and do all the things. The next day, I'm probably going to be on the couch in bed, having to put my legs up because I've swollen up too much, or maybe I have a lot of chronic pain because I've overdone it the day before. Um, a lot of the times with lipedema or lymphedema, we really have to pick and choose what we're going to spend our energy on and what we're going to focus on. You know, one of the things that I've personally dealt with recently is appointment fatigue. I am constantly going to different doctor and medical appointments, and it is really difficult when you are constantly there to not get worn out just from going to the appointments. I honestly say half my life is a medical appointments and half my life is my work and my family and my friends now. So it's something that really takes up a lot of time, and you end up juggling a lot of these things instead of being able to handle them like everyone else. I don't know if anyone else has heard of spoon theory, but spoon theory is a really great way to explain how we have a limited amount of energy that we can expend, and once we're out of spoons, as they call it, uh, we're done. We don't have any more to give. We can't borrow some for tomorrow from tomorrow. And so that limited source of energy for us is something we're constantly struggling and juggling with to figure out what we're going to focus on day to day. Bumping into barriers. This is one of the things that I think that I hope is relatable for most people. It's definitely something that I definitely personally deal with a lot. Um, Fat phobic doctors that, believe diet rhetoric and don't understand lipedema and don't understand lymphedema, and unfortunately end up contributing a lot of harm and a lot of trauma to patients. Unfortunately, what happened for me was that I started avoiding medical care. I honestly started avoiding medical care because I was so sick of having to deal with medical professionals who were judging me and telling me that this was my fault. And deep down, even though I didn't know what the diagnosis were at the time, I knew it wasn't my fault. I knew I hadn't done this to myself. I didn't have the words, I didn't have the terms to tell them why I hadn't done it. But that is one of the really frustrating parts about living in a larger body because of lipedema, is that all these doctors are like, lose 50 pounds in 6 months and see me. I was literally told that once. And I was like, if I could, don't you think I would have by now? Our society doesn't treat plus size people very well. If I could have, don't you think I would have by now? And they didn't have any answers for me, and I didn't go back. And I didn't go back for many years. So a lot of these things, these barriers become not just physical, but attitudinal barriers as well. Um, I've had friends who didn't want to accommodate me anymore. They got tired of doing accommodations. Now, I didn't know what the word was at the time that I was asking for accommodation, but they didn't want to, it was too much effort to hang out. It was too much effort to, find something we could all do. And that's really frustrating when your support group also starts to diminish because we also have a really ableist society. And it's really frustrating when you want to be able to go out and do all these things with your friends and your family, and you can't, whether it's because of your swelling, because of your size, and the fact that there is not, size inclusive furniture that accommodates you, or, rides or whatever it is. Um, Discriminatory policies. So, one of the things I've personally dealt with is feeling like those bumper cars where I was bumping heads with a supervisor. I started a new job and I really loved the job, but I found that the chair that I was using was not accommodating my size. And it was an office chair. I was working in an 8 to 4. And so I asked if we could figure out some options. And luckily, a coworker had told me that there was a chair that would accommodate my size on a construction site within the same company. So I went to my supervisor and I asked, and I said, hey, so I heard about this chair. I've been struggling with this chair that I have currently. I've tried different options and nothing is working. Is it possible to get this chair? Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, sure, we'll do that. And a week goes by, and another week goes by. So I ask again, and then I have to ask a third time. So a lot of these work policies that are put in place to accommodate people with disabilities don't also accommodate people of size or who live in larger bodies. However, disability does not discriminate based on your body size. Unfortunately, we do not have any protection here in Canada for anyone who lives in a plus size body to not be fired, to get accommodation, any of those things. And I don't know about you guys, but it was extremely uncomfortable for me to ask my supervisor for what felt like a favor at the time, what I now know is to be an accommodation that they have to provide. And it's something that most people maybe wouldn't think about, is that accessibility and accommodations can be as simple as an office chair. Just providing the furniture that allows that employee to do their job to their fullest. Inaccessible spaces. A lot of the times I find that there are many inaccessible spaces. Uh, People with lipedema, like I said, have a lot of that, um, the fat in their thighs and hips, and chairs are a big issue with inaccessible spaces, especially ones with armrests. Chairs are typically only 19 inches between armrests because they're standardized. But who are they standardized to? Whose bodies? Who was the original people in the workplace? Was it men? Hmm. Do men have hips? Do men have thighs? Not typically. So when we think about all of the furniture when you leave your home, how many times do you fit in the furniture? If you're straight size or under a size 14, probably pretty often. But if you have hips or thighs and you're a woman or someone assigned female at birth, and especially if you have lipedema, you might not fit in those chairs. And that's why, because they weren't built for your body to begin with. One of the things that I like to talk about a lot, to give someone perspective of, if you've never lived in a plus size body, what does this feel like, right? I want you to imagine that you're in a world built for children. Most of you have probably been in a kindergarten class, right? So you can think about the little tiny chairs with armrests, like little plastic ones, that, are half a foot off the ground. You can think of the little tiny tables and maybe the little toy cars that they can drive. So you're in this world built for children. But here's the clincher. You're the only adult. How does that change the way that you view the environment around you? How does that change the way you interact with the environment around you? Are you going to be uncomfortable? Are you going to be very visible all of a sudden because you're the only adult in this world full of children? And if you can sit in that little tiny chair that's half a foot off the ground and probably not made for your weight, are you going to be worried about breaking it? Are you going to have bruises and like indents on your thighs because it's not made for your body? It's not made for your size. Are you going to be able to get out of the chair? And what if you go to a restaurant with friends and you're that only adult? Are you gonna stick out and sit in the aisle a bit because they haven't thought about your body when they created the width of the aisle? Are you gonna have a hard time putting your legs under the table, maybe? And if all of those kids are there running around and driving in those cars, those little toy cars, are you gonna be able to fit in that car? If so, how far are you gonna drive? Are your knees going to be up here? Are you going to be really uncomfortable the whole time? Now, how does that change how much you interact with the world around you? How often are you going to leave your home? How often are you going to go out with friends? This is the experience of someone who's plus size every single day of their life. Not once a month, not once a week, especially if you live on the larger end of the larger spectrum of fatness, like I do. This is every single time I leave my home. Because typically we'll curate and use and buy custom pieces that fit our bodies in our homes, right? Someone who's 5 foot is not going to buy a really, really tall couch or a really, really tall table. They're going to buy one that's made for their body. But when you leave your home, your body is not being curated for anymore. And a lot of the times, unintentionally, these public spaces and businesses are actually excluding plus size people. And when I can't walk in the door and sit down, that is something that tells me that I automatically don't belong there. Your environment is already your environment is already communicating to me that I don't belong there. So that's what I mean when I talk about inaccessible spaces. And I think it's really, really important to have conversations with anyone who has lipedema because they might not feel comfortable coming to your home. They might not feel comfortable going out to that place. And it has really nothing to do with they don't want to hang out with you. It might have a lot to do with those spaces are inaccessible for their bodies. The disappearing act. There was a rabbit there, I swear. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about this already, but I'm going to go over it a little bit more. So, like I mentioned, compression, MLD, all of those things that we have to do, whether we have lymphedema or lipedema, both of those things are not typically covered, or at least fully covered, and they cost a lot of money. So, compression can be $300 or more per pair. Typically, you need a couple pairs per year. If you're lucky, you get some coverage from the government. If you're not lucky, well, that's coming right out of your pocket. Manual lymphatic drainage, at least $125 an hour. You need it multiple times a week, and it's not covered. So all of these costs are on the patient because we don't have the supports we need with our healthcare system, especially in Alberta, but I know in other provinces it's potentially even worse. Um, and that's why it's really, really important that we continue to advocate for public healthcare support and for public healthcare in general, because I don't know about you guys, but I don't really have an extra couple grand a year to spend on this stuff, you know? Um, no one just hands me cash or handfuls of money every year to be like, oh, here, let me help you out, right? So it's one of those things that we we need to think about how we support people long term, because especially um, if you're getting diagnosed late, you might have been dealing with this for a really long time, and now you're all of a sudden you have no idea that you had to save an extra $2,000 a year or whatever it is to all of a sudden support your health, right? These are usually surprise things that we get told that, oh, by the way, this is required now for you to exist. Um, Empathy tends to go out the window because these are chronic conditions that progressively get worse. A lot of the times, people are like, oh, well, aren't you better yet? Oh, isn't this over yet? Like, oh, you're still dealing with this? And there's a lot of lack of empathy the longer you live with these conditions, unfortunately. And so it's really, really important to give people a lot of grace when you're wondering why they might not want to come out or why they might need some extra help that day. Because we live with this condition every single day and it inconveniences us every single day. If you're a friend of someone who has these conditions and it inconveniences you once every 2 weeks when you hang out, that's a bit of a difference, right? Um, Now, of course, health is one of those things that is something we kind of worry about disappearing on us. I was very concerned that my health was deteriorating once I learned about these conditions. I was worried how I was going to support myself, um, like with money. I was going to worried about how I was going to support my health. Um, and because there isn't a lot of um, financial, but also healthcare support with um, with our government, especially for lipedema, the support part feels like it disappears too. It feels like you don't have any support right away, and you panic. You wonder, how am I going to do this? What am I going to do? Like, what? And all these things go through your head, and so sometimes that also means your friendships disappear too. I've had a few friends that are just like, that seems inconvenient. I don't think that's going to work for me anymore. And so that's why I go back to it's really, really important to curate a lot of support for yourself, whether it's with the Alberta Lymphedema Association or with Lipedema Canada. Knowing other people that have your conditions is it's everything. Honestly, it's everything. You don't know you need a support group until you're in one, as I found out. And just being able to exist and not have to worry about explaining that part of your life is really, really validating and really, really helpful. And so don't do this alone. Don't do this alone. You don't have to. It is hard enough dealing with these conditions day in and day out. Don't deal with it alone. Just find a new friend, you know. That's one of the beautiful things that I've learned about these two communities is they're very welcoming. They're like, oh hey, you've got it, I've got it, cool. Here's how you do this. And I've found more advice and more support through these people that I've met, that I've had in the rest of my life, and that's been really, really amazing. Yes, the symptom management. We get to roll the dice and decide which ones we're going to deal with, depending on the day. So lymphedema especially has a lot of pain, has a lot of swelling. skin tightness, skin differences. And I constantly feel like I'm, depending on the day, which one I'm going to be dealing with. I end up rolling the dice to say, okay, well, it's 32 degrees out today. Probably going to be dealing with a lot of swelling. And so symptom management is a big part of these conditions. Lipedema also comes with swelling, but not as severe typically. But there's inflammation with both of these. Pain is probably another one well, definitely is one that affects both. Um, Skin tightness and swelling is never not painful in my experience. Um, and with lipedema, the actual fat itself is painful fat. That's um, one of the main distinguishing features of lipedema versus quote unquote obesity is that my dog walking across my lap hurts. Couldn't figure that one out. I had no idea why that was happening. No one else winced when the dog walked across their lap, and I've got chihuahuas. They're not very big. Getting my blood pressure taken hurts. What do you mean it's not supposed to feel like they're cutting into your arm? Really? Not everyone experiences that? Huh. That's news to me, right? So these are some of the symptoms that you can deal with lymphedema. And then on the lymphedema side is a lot of that swelling and skin tightness for sure. Yes, the weight of the expectations. My poor little hamster here. He's just, he's having a hard time. So, like we've talked about, the weight of expectations from society, from family and friends, from doctors and health providers, all of these things are very heavy. And I find that we don't often get to put them down. A lot of those things that, fad diets are trying to tell us that we'll lose blah, blah, blah amount of weight. That's not happening with lipedema. That's not happening with a lot of these things. And honestly, those expectations are not helpful. I've learned that I really have to gauge my own expectations for like, I have to decide how I feel. And instead of working based on weight, which can fluctuate drastically with lymphedema and continuously goes up with lipedema, I've honestly started to go based on what I can do and what I can't do, and how much endurance I have and how much strength I feel I have. And those are indicators for myself of how well I'm doing physically, more so than a number on a scale. Yeah, gotta put on that brave face. So with these conditions, there's a lot of fear. It's a lot of panic. First time I came home with compression, did I have a full-blown anxiety attack? Absolutely, because it's very, very different knowing that you have to do these things to when you actually put them on and have to experience them. For myself personally, I have a lot of sensory issues, and compression for me was sensory overload. I wanted to cut those things off of me the first second I had them on. And it took a while for me to get used to that feeling of having that constant tightness. Someone who's plus size, I don't wear a lot of tight fitting clothes because I have never done that, right? There's also a lot of anger that comes with getting these diagnoses. Like, it's not fair that I didn't get diagnosed sooner. It's not fair that I my doctor didn't know, you know? And you can't exactly show up to the doctor's office and go on, a rant about how they should have done this and they should have done that. Like, unfortunately, they didn't have the education to know any better either. So a lot of the times we're putting on that brave face to try and get through the different phases of dealing with these conditions. And yeah, it comes with a lot of emotion. Our unpredictable future. So we do have both of these conditions are progressive. They do continue to get worse without management. And there's a lot of fear, like I mentioned before, and there's a lot of change involved. Um, Having to change your whole life to manage conditions, your health, is really shocking, especially for me at 34. It was like, what do you mean I can't be like everybody else? What do you mean I can't just go out with my friends and do whatever I want? there was a lot of change really quickly, and it's really, really important to ensure that people that you are interacting with that have these conditions, you're really giving them a lot of grace because that change is really hard to deal with. Us as human beings, not so great with change. We don't love it. Our brains are not very happy when there's continual change, and there can be with these conditions. The balancing act. Kind of talked about a little bit of these things already, but I mean, the raccoon's just so cute. I had to throw him in there. So, our energy levels, we kind of went over this, but yeah, the energy levels with chronic illness, and especially when you have lipedema in your legs can be really, really, really heavy. It's like adding weights to your waist and to your thighs and to your hips, and then expecting you to run around the rest of your life with them on. And because you can also, because lipedema can progress quite quickly, especially with stress, you might put on a lot of weight really quickly. And so our bodies are continually trying to keep up with us, but then our energy levels are dropping because we're basically power lifters every single day, right? Employment, hard thing to balance once you have chronic conditions, once you have things that are disabling, because a lot of times both of these conditions are. And like I mentioned, that constant change in those symptoms as well. Ah, yes, my favorite part. Jumping through the hoops of public health care and health insurance. I know that everyone has such fond memories of doing these things. Health insurance that says, "Ah, you don't need compression. That's not a thing you need to live your life with. Don't worry about it." And dealing with the public healthcare system, which often, like with lipedema, has not even heard of this because we're not even educating our doctors yet. And then also, they might be trying their best, but they're very overworked. They're very underpaid, and a lot of these people are doing their very best to try and help us, but they really don't have the resources. And so we end up having to jump through a lot of hoops, whether it be disability tax credits and trying to get that, whether it being trying to just get seen by the right professionals. Getting a diagnosis in Canada for lipedema, it's not really a diagnosis when they don't officially recognize it. They can do the little drop down on the computer, but it's really, really difficult. There are not many people, or not many doctors that actually do like formally recognize it. And then on top of that, we don't have a standard of care. So there's no guidelines for these doctors to tell us how to help us, to tell them how to help us. And so we end up having to do um a lot of research on our own. We end up having to be our own experts in these conditions in order to properly manage them. Um, Now, I know that these are really heavy topics, and I know that this is sometimes really uncomfortable to talk about. I don't want to leave you guys feeling like there's nothing we can do about these things. Number one, we need to raise awareness. People need to know about both of these conditions. Even though lymphedema is something that, is acknowledged by our healthcare system, there is a lot of support we need yet. Manual lymphatic drainage massage therapy should be covered. It needs to be covered. We can't afford to continually do this all the time, and we need it. Um, Lipedema, we need so much awareness. We're about 80 years behind people who live in Germany. We're about mm, 50 or 30 to 50 years behind the United States. So a lot of these other countries are very well versed in lipedema. They have action plans. Um, they have doctors that are specialists in this. But here in Canada, we can't even get potentially life and mobility saving surgery because there's no surgeons that are qualified. And so that advocation piece is really, really important because I personally know how much how much advocacy can do. Um, I have now been fortunate enough to find appropriate doctors that are willing to work with me on a lot of my health conditions. But I've also started to implement size inclusive chairs and size inclusive they started to include size inclusive blood pressure cuffs. So now I can get the proper care that I need at my own doctor's office simply because I asked them. It's advocacy really is about not taking no for an answer and realizing that people are wanting to help. They just might not know how to. And it's really, really it's really, really about doing this as a community as well. That's why the Alberta Lymphedema Association, Lipedema Canada are so important as part of this is you need support, you need help. And honestly, I have found an entire community of people that I'm so grateful for and that I'm so happy I've met them. I've met some brand new friends. I've met some really incredible people that are here fighting for the same thing that I'm fighting for. And that self-care piece is really important too. These things are manageable. We do have conservative measures. There are some surgical measures um, that you might have to travel internationally for, but there are things that you can do. Compression helps, swimming helps. I use a vibration plate to reduce some of my pain. There are things that you can do to manage these conditions, um, but without further awareness, we really are going to only be able to manage them instead of being able to find, long-term treatments or cures. And so I want to empower every one of you to be able to like go talk to your MLA, be like, hey, have you heard of this condition? Send a letter, talk to your doctors and be like, you know what, we need more awareness around these things. And honestly, if you need help with that, that's part of what I do as well. I help individuals advocate, but also that's what these associations are for. They're here to help you navigate these things. And honestly, I am, like I said, I'm very grateful that they're willing to give me a platform to talk about lipedema and to just bring some awareness, but also bring some hope that we're making some changes. Don't worry. This this is not the end. This is just the beginning of where we go from here. And I don't know. I'm excited to see what happens in the next little while. We got some powerful advocates, and when we work together, we get a lot done. That's about all the time that I have for my presentation, but I do want to open up the floor to anyone who has questions or anybody who wants more information on where to go for resources. Lipedemacanada.org is the website for lipedema. And Allison can definitely put up the information for the Lymphedema Association as well.
Yeah, I can put those in the chat.
I'll stop my share here. Oh my gosh. But yeah, thank you, Allison. I really appreciate you giving me this platform to talk about it. And yeah, I don't know. I'm excited to see what we do in the future.
Yeah, of course. No, I was thinking as you were talking, just listening to you speak, people can feel less alone, right? And then you said,
Mm-hmm.
like, the thing, like knowing other people who have your conditions is everything. And I really think that that's true. So I think what you're doing, speaking on this is very important. So I'm really, really grateful that you came to speak to us. Um, it is, I guess, if anyone has comments or questions, feel free to put them in the chat. But it is unfortunate that you have to feel like, not just you, but like anyone who is asking for something has to feel like a nuisance or uncomfortable in general, just like asking for like basic accommodations from their doctors, from employers, friends, just like
Mm-hmm.
basic understanding. So I'm glad that you're asking and you're advocating and encouraging others to ask, because the more people that ask, the more normalized it is and the more comfortable other people will feel to ask, right? So it's just starting a little
Absolutely.
snowball.
Yeah, it's the ripple effect. I tell you, I didn't realize how powerful that advocation piece was and that speaking up for myself part was until I started to see the change. And that's what I do as a business as well. And it's funny seeing physical changes in spaces that I've made, just as simple as Now the waiting room at my physio place has got a chair without armrests because I asked. That's all it took. Worst they could say was no. And they were like, oh, hey, we didn't even think about this. And I think that's often the case is that it's not that there is an intentional exclusion, it's that they haven't thought about it. And until we bring it up, they don't know it's a problem. Right. And so I really do encourage everyone to just, if you see something, say it, you know? And if you're not able to or you don't feel comfortable, reach out. That's what we're here for.
If anyone thinks of questions after the fact on anything that Diana has mentioned, I think you were going to provide your contact, but you can also reach out to the association and we'll
Yes.
connect you with Diana as well.
Yeah, I can actually put that in the chat here really quickly. So my business is called Accessibility, the number four, Everybody, Consulting. And I am on Instagram, I am on LinkedIn, and on Facebook. I don't have the website, it is coming. But you can also email me at accessibilityforeverybody.com. Or sorry, accessibilityforeverybody@gmail.com. And I think that is the easiest way to probably get a hold of me is through the email. I check that the most often. But yeah, if you need help with the advocation, that's what I'm here for. If you need the support, that's what the ALA is here for.
And we do have a comment and a question here from Jen. So gratitude for continuing to expand my understanding, Diana. Curious question. You share big truths, as you say, and I'm wondering, how do you navigate the depths of the heaviness presumed on your mental wellness? Yes, because you do seem very positive, Dan. You are such
Well,
a delightful energy. And is there a practice you have to stay energized? Yeah, that is a good question.
like I mentioned before, I think the self-care part is really, really important. Whether that is, speaking with a psychologist, finding a support group that understands what you're going through. I personally also do a lot of mindfulness. I do some meditation, but it is like, unfortunately, it's the reality is these are really difficult things to live with. And last week, I was not okay. And, I've really started to build up a lot of those practices and a lot of those different tools because I do need those tools and everyone needs those tools to be able to deal with these things. Especially with chronic illness, it's really, really something that it doesn't go away. And so you need different tool sets to go through. And that's why I say reach out for support. Find your people, honestly. Find your people. My people have showed up for me today, and I appreciate that. And sometimes it's just gonna be reaching out and asking for that little bit of help. It took me a long time to realize that asking for help was not as scary as I thought it was. And investing in therapy was the best investment in myself that I've made so far. And 8 years going, and it's one of the things that keeps me going still. So find what works for you, but also make sure you've got support in whatever way that looks for you.
Yeah, great question and great answer. Chris asked, Will says, thank you for your wonderful presentation. Do you think these diagnoses have impacted getting treatment for other health conditions?
Yeah, so it's funny you mentioned that actually, because lymphedema was the first thing that I officially got diagnosed with before the lipedema. Um, and it kind of led me down the path of exploration of like, what the heck is going on with my body? Um, I honestly, even though I don't wish that I had the lymphedema happen, it really did push me to finally be like, you know what? I'm not okay with having doctors that dismiss me. I'm not okay with not knowing answers to these things. And I finally went out and changed my doctor and found one that was willing to support me. And I've kind of been on a journey of diagnoses since. But luckily for me, that final push was literally just being like, I I deserve care. I deserve care just the same as anyone else. It doesn't matter what size my body is. Um, the fact of the matter is that staging out of care, which is a very real thing when you're in a larger plus size body, is not okay. And it really did kind of push me in the direction of fighting for my own healthcare and fighting for myself. And you really do need to No one's going to be able to advocate for you better than yourself. No one cares as much as you because it doesn't affect anyone as much as it does you. So don't forget that you have power and that also your medical providers work for you. You hire them technically. And that's sometimes a really important shift in mindset that helps you learn to advocate for yourself and ask for what you need.
Right. You're not a nuisance because you're paying them to do what they're doing, right? Essentially. Which
You can hire
segues,
and fire.
yeah, which segues
Yeah.
nicely into Candace's question. What do you tell your doctor that looks at you and says to you, walk more? So along those
Mm,
lines of advocacy, do you have any like specifics you can share?
yeah. Um, when they tell me to walk more, eat less, all those things, I start to ask them what they know about lipedema. I start to ask them what they know about lymphedema and what they realistically expect, because those expectations sometimes on their end are unrealistic. And I honestly quite often will say, you know what, here's what I'm already doing. This is where I want to be, but with chronic pain and illness, there are only so many things that are within my control. These are, you know, lipedema is a genetic condition. If they do not understand that, they're not going to understand that you can't just lose weight. Lymphedema, depending on the heat, depending on whatever else, is not something that you can just push through. And if they don't understand chronic illness, I honestly recommend going to get a second opinion. I honestly recommend checking and seeing if there's another doctor or provider that is available to you that has a better understanding, or even asking if there's a specialist. I know there's specifically not a specialist for lipedema, but there is a provider out there for you. I know that is extremely hard, especially in Alberta right now, but I'm telling you, I found one and they care and they're doing the very best that they can and they've read the pamphlets. So I promise there are people out there still trying to do their best.
Yeah, and you did mention the pamphlets earlier, which is a good point because they
Mm-hmm.
say on them, right, the lymphedema and the lipedema, they say like kind of some of those myths and things very straight up. So even if they don't read the whole pamphlet, you can point to something and say, look, it says like I kind of
Yes, it
see that.
literally says here on this official brochure that I brought into you,
Yeah.
but this is not a realistic expectation. And that's a great point, Allison, is that, you know, they might think they know what these conditions are, but often they don't. They honestly, I think it was you and I were talking about how they maybe get 20 minutes of education on lymphedema and they get 0 minutes of education on lipedema. So don't always assume that your doctor knows best. Unfortunately, they're generalists. If they're a family physician, they know a little about a lot, not the other way around. So it is really worth your time to get a specialist, to get a second opinion. And honestly, your massage therapist, your manual lymphatic drainage massage therapist can provide letters explaining what your conditions are. I had mine do that for me, saying, here are the realistic expectations with both of these conditions. This is how it impacts her life. And this is, what she's going to look like, how much time she's going to invest and how much money she's going to invest in treating these conditions.
Yeah, your CLT is your certified lymphedema therapist or manual lymphatic drainage specialist is your best friend. Like they have more
Absolutely.
knowledge.
Make friends with everyone. You're gonna need them. So make friends with them now. Get to know as many as you can because I tell you what, they're great people that are there to help you. And also, you might need their support with those things. Mhm.
Yeah, and they're very often willing to give that support. So
Absolutely.
awesome. Well, I think that's all the questions and comments that we have at the moment. The websites and the contact information is in the chat, so I will also put it at in the description of the video. And you can reach out at any time to Diana or to the Alberta Lymphedema Association. And we thank Diana for being here and giving us this inspirational talk. Lots of good information. I think probably everyone learned a thing or two. And we thank everyone else for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.